sitting next to me is Mr. Sekou Jambe. He's the Secretary General of the Union. Um, of course, to give just a brief introductory remark about the reason why we are holding this press conference, a lot of you um, were actually at the center of it. We know yesterday there was a protest, and this protest by a movement calling itself 3 Years Jotna led to arrest of 4 journalists and close down of 2 media houses, both of them radio. That's the reason why we are holding this press conference. To issue our collective position as media workers and as journalists on this position, and to talk about its significance within the context of our transition from a dictatorship into a democracy. This is perhaps the most significant thing that happened in our transition, because it's all too reminiscent of our past, and it's perhaps everything we thought we would not have to confront during this period and move on as a country. And that's why the union think it's very important that it comes out and issue a statement on this, and while it engage the partners in the government to solve the situation. So Mr. Sekou Jambe is just going to immediately read that statement, and from the reading of the statement, we will take questions from each one of you on issues of our concern and issues pertaining to the press statement. Mr. Jambe, you.
Okay, thank you. So this statement actually that I am coming to read represents the official position of the Gambia Press Union. And it begins. The past 24 hours actually witnessed the most aggressive attack on press freedom since this new government assumed office in 2017. Between 12 noon and 2 p.m. yesterday, 2 radio stations have been forced to cease operations, and 4 journalists arrested within the same period of 2 hours or thereabout. Earlier in the day, one of the journalists covering the disturbances was attacked and physically assaulted. These incidents, we all know, came in the wake of the anti-government protest called the 3 Years Jotna. The protest, as we learned through media reports, unfortunately turned violent even before it started. Violence against journalists came from both sides, we have to admit. Sankule Janko, a reporter for Dakar-based West Africa Democracy Radio, was attacked by a group of protesters who were visibly angry and armed with sticks. They manhandled him and forcefully took away his equipment, including his mobile telephone. If not for the intervention of one of the protesters, according to Sankule, this young reporter that we have, a very promising one, and recently the winner of the Best Journalist Award in the Gambia, would have been harmed, if not killed. In the afternoon, about a dozen armed personnel of the Police Intervention Unit of the Gambia Police Force stormed the offices of Home Digital FM in Brikama and ordered the staff to cease operations with immediate effect. The manager, Pamodu Bojang, was taken away from the studio by the police. And although the authorities have refused to confirm his whereabouts to us, we've made a lot of inquiries. We have learned through reliable sources that he was detained at the PIU headquarters in Kanifing before later in the evening he was taken to the anti-crime offices in Bigelow. The story of Pamodu and that of Home Digital is similar to that of King FM, where about a dozen armed PIU personnel about the same time stormed the offices there in Talinding and ordered the staff out of the premises. They shut down the radio station and they whisked away 3 journalists. And they include the manager, Jibi Jallo, and a reporter, Ibrahim Jallo. And the third person, we are yet to confirm the name because according to the staff, he is quite new there. So in essence, from the disturbances of yesterday, we have 2 radio stations shut down and 4 journalists detained after their arrest. And all these actions were done without any legitimate basis. We are in receipt of the press release that the government issued last night confirming the closure as well as the arrest and detention of the journalist. The government dispatch states that the radio stations were shut down because they were broadcasting incendiary messages. This is unfounded and it is very disappointing. For we have confirmed from multiple sources, including the manager of King FM, that the radio station did not broadcast any information about the protest. The station had throughout yesterday, until the time that it was closed, been playing music that had no bearing on the disturbances. Home Digital FM indeed was broadcasting messages about the protest. And again, we at the GPU have gone to the scene and we have confirmed from multiple sources, from the staff working there to the people that were listening to the radio at the time, and they all confirmed to us that there was no such message on the radio. The burden of proof here lies on the government to come out with evidence to say that this indeed was what Home Digital was saying, and this is how bad that message was. So, therefore, we are of the considered view that the closure of the radio stations were arbitrary, one, which makes it also unlawful. Equally, the proclamation contained in yesterday's press release, which appeared to warn journalists against presenting divergent views on the 3 years Jotna issue, is as dangerous as it is unlawful. It has no legitimate basis, and therefore we call on the media to disregard it and present diverse opinions as possible on this issue of legitimate interest. We will challenge any attempt by the government to pursue further with the implementation of this proclamation. And if you know our history, you know we will do this because we've done this before at the Supreme Court of the Gambia. We've done something like this before the ECOWAS Court. We've done it before the UPR, and we are ready to go to any length to make sure that press freedom prevails in the country. We are saying the proclamation and the order for the closure, they were very unlawful because the Information and Communication Act, this is the piece of legislation that governs broadcasting in this country. And Section 237 of it indeed gives powers to the Minister of Information, who grants broadcasting license to revoke or suspend it. That power the minister has. The security has no power to shut down any radio station or any media house. And through our consultations with the minister, we have confirmed, or he has confirmed to us, that no such order came from the office of the minister. And even if it came from the office of the minister, the law didn't just stop at giving the minister the powers. It lays down conditions, and those conditions have not been met. So for us, we know why exactly the radio stations were shut down. And we know why Sankule was attacked, and we also know why the journalists were arrested and detained. And we are looking no further than what happened in the past. The reason they were arrested, the reason the radio stations were closed down was the same reason data was gone down on the Jame. It was the same reason that Chief Mane was killed on the Jame. And it is the same reason that media houses were shut down 15 times between 1994 and 2006 on the Jame. And it is the same reason that dozens of journalists were tortured on the Jame. And it is the same reason that 20% of Gambian journalists between 1994 and 2016 were forced to go into exile on the Jame. And it is the same reason that more than 24 journalists were assaulted under Barrow, and nothing is done about it. In fact, yesterday's attacks bring to memory 22 years of brutal repression of the media. The modus operandi of this government bears the hallmark of the tactics used by the former government in its disregard for press freedom and in its disregard for the rule of law. As a union, we have engaged the services of a lawyer, and the instructions are very clear. Help us secure the release of the journalist in detention and launch a civil action against the state on matters that we are talking about today before any court of law that has the competence to preside over such, whether in the Gambia or abroad. And while it is not our remit to comment on the substance of the debate on the issue of the tenure of the president and the dispute arising from that, as a union and as an institution of democratic governance, we call on the government to launch an independent inquiry into the disturbances and act in a manner that is just, rather than banning groups, rather than arresting people. There is no doubt that the way this whole issue of 3S Jotna was handled and the heavy-handedness of the security yesterday makes a mockery of our transitional justice process, and it also makes a mockery of our ongoing democratic reforms. In conclusion, we call on the government to immediately release the journalist and lift the unlawful ban on the radio stations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the statement is clear. If there is anybody who also